Repeal Oak-Fired Steakhouse raises a glass to authenticity on historic Whiskey Row. Housed in the former site of JTS Brown & Sons wholesale warehouse and bottling operations, it's where the family welled up with pride as their labels became staples in bar rooms all over the country. This is why we reclaim history by preparing steaks over the flames of oak-aged barrels. Recognized nationally as one of America's best bourbon bars and the Wine Spectator Best of Award of Excellence, this is the place for those with a taste for experience.
With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me today, live on location over at the beautiful Repeal Steakhouse here in downtown Louisville. I'm with my good friend, my co-host, Matt. Matt, how you doing today, man?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing really great. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I think I just used the word man at least 4 times in that introductory sentence right there.
And we are less than a minute in.
Less than
it's going to be a
30
good
seconds.
one.
It is, man. Man, there you go, Matt. I'm all over it today.
Out.
But we are on location. We are in downtown Louisville today, and it is Louisville. It's not Louisville. It's Louisville. So we're having a great time here at Repeal. So we're in the Barrel Room, if you guys have never been here before.
That's right. They curated out a special room for us and everything here.
Yeah, this is pretty swanky. I've been at the restaurant before and had dinner here. Very nice. Yeah. Never been in this room before. So this is pretty sweet. I really like this. We may have to come over and do this more often, Matt.
Yeah, I can get used to it.
Yeah, but we are presented actually today. Our show is presented by Repeal Steakhouse, so that's why we're here on location, hanging out with these great people over here in Louisville. Took the little drive over from Lexington, just an hour drive, not bad at all. Matt, we had a good week, man. We had a fun time yesterday, did we not?
Yeah, we did. We were down at Bourbon on the Banks in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
Enjoying the beautiful weather. I know the forecast all week was looking pretty grim.
Sure.
And then sure enough, it was blazingly hot for a little bit of the day.
Yeah,
downright.
It was out there in the sun. It was like, wait a second, man. It's supposed to be like October 1st. It's not supposed to be this warm. The sun was out, but it felt good to get outside. No rain. Like you said, the hurricane pushed off to the East Coast. I think it kind of surprised everybody the direction it took. And no rain for us. Just a beautiful day out there. Had a great time. Got to see a lot of people, and including our guests who we're going to introduce here in just a few minutes. But we had a really good time. Those guys, Renee and Amzie and Diane, they do a great job putting that festival on, all the people involved with that. So we appreciate what they do to make that happen. We had them on the show just last month, I think it was. So
yeah,
if you didn't check out that episode, check it out. Just great people, man. They're doing a really good thing over there. So we really appreciate the opportunity to be involved and hang out with that. Matt had a good time. Matt had a designated driver. I did not.
That's right. So I had a great time.
Yeah. All right, Matt. Enough bantering. Tell everybody who we have with us today.
Absolutely. So I also want to point out, we are now 2 episodes in a row on location.
Oh, that's right, because we were down at Fresh Bourbon.
We were at Fresh Bourbon.
One that's out.
For our last episode.
That's right. What's going on with us, man?
I know. I think your wife's getting tired of us hanging out in your house.
She's like, get out of my basement, damn it.
Exactly. Take this show on the road.
Now, this is a podcasting table. This Barrel Room, this probably is maybe a 15 to 20 seater table, possibly.
Absolutely. You can fit a lot more important people than just you and I at this table. That wouldn't be hard to do with any table.
But it's really cool, man. Yeah. It's got the old brick. It's almost like you're in an old bunker or something, right? It's got the brick. Even the ceiling is brick, but they've got the little rick house here. They got different barrels here with taps. And I'm wondering, Matt, look like they have locks on them, though, unfortunately. So I don't.
Yeah, I already went through and checked it.
You checked?
Yeah, there's no
it to Matt.
Key hidden anywhere.
Thank God Matt doesn't have a drill with him, because if he had a drill, every one of these barrels would have had a hole.
There's always a way in, right?
That's exactly right. All right, Matt.
Tell everybody
who we have with us, man.
We've got joining us today the single barrel curator from Kentucky Peerless Distilling Company, John Wadell. John, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's a beautiful Sunday down here downtown, so always happy to be here.
Yeah, man. It was great to see you yesterday. That was fun. You know, and the funny thing was, first time I met you was just 2 weeks ago at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. I'd never had the opportunity to meet you before, but knew your name, you know, because the Angel Share podcast, Christy Atkinson that does stuff with us.
Great people over there, yeah.
Yeah. So I just knew who you were, and then I was like, oh, hey, you're John. Yeah, I know you, but I don't really know you. So
that's what I love about, though, the bourbon community. I mean, you just never know. You know, we're out there doing events, and it's always nice to run into people actually in person rather than over social media.
Yeah, it is. I agree with that. It's always fun to get to meet people. And, you know, we had somebody, Kevin and Devin, if you're out there listening to this episode, we ran into them from Michigan, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so they were there at the podcast, and Kevin came over and said, hey, are you Mark? And I'm like, what, me? You recognize me? I'm like, wait a second, what's up with that? But yeah, so it was nice to get to meet them. Matt's got Christmas plans with them and everything. Don't you?
Us Michiganders, the Michigonads got to stick together on this one.
Oh, that was so funny. I'm like, where's Matt? I'm like, he's over there talking with his brand new best friends, Kevin and Devin.
Anyway, enough about Matt. Come on, we got a great guest here.
We do. Let's talk about that. So I tell you what we'd like to do, John, because we drink the different expressions. So we've got something poured up. You graciously brought us several different bottles that we're going to drink through today. So if you want to tell everybody what we got poured up on this first round. Of course, I'm turning the bottle like you don't know what it is.
No, I appreciate it. No, so what we got right here, the first glass I poured, this is our rye small batch. You know, everything we do, if you're not familiar with Peerless, we do strictly sweet mash. Everything we do is barrel strength as well, so we don't chill filter, charcoal filter. We just run it through a simple paper filter. But we come off the still around 130 proof, take everything down to 107, then put it in the barrels. After maturation, we'll bring everything down and process it right there at the distillery. So we do everything on site too, right here in downtown Louisville. We cook there, distill there, bottle there. We even have a rick house, holds about 1,200 barrels right there on site too.
Wow. Okay. I've been by. I've never actually been in the distillery, which is sad to say, man. So, and that's why we were talking about guests. I'm like, we've not had Peerless on. I'm like, I don't know how we've managed to do that 2.5 years that we've not had you guys on. So we are correcting that mistake today.
Come down anytime, man.
We would definitely love to do that. So this rye, undisclosed mash bill, right?
Yeah, we don't release our mash bill, but we use corn rye and barley, and I promise you it's nothing crazy. We do more of a Kentucky-style rye, so it's a little bit lower rye content, not like your 95.5s. We sit right around in like the 60 percentile.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, so that's good. Matt's a big rye fan. So the age on this one, is this?
So each batch is a little different. We use anywhere between 20 to 30 barrels. So it's a mingle of probably about 4, 5, and 6 year old.
Okay.
We didn't source anything, so everything we make ourselves. And our rye came out in 2019 in July as a 2-year rye.
Okay.
Then the bourbon came out in May of 2019.
All right. Yeah. So it's had time to age, and you guys have had it on site. So we'll talk about the distillery here in just a few minutes and talk about the history and how you guys got started. So Matt, you're the rye guy, man. So I'm going to throw it to you as you're over there sniffing it. What are you picking up on the nose on this?
It's got a real bright nose. It's that, like when I think of rye, this is a lot of the nose that I pick up. Real bright. It's got good amount of herbs, like nice and grassy, nice and grainy as well. But it's also got a cream in this. There's like a vanilla. There's a nougat, some sweetness, some nice soft tones underneath it as well. But I really like how bright, how herbal and grassy the grain, that fresh rye, that cracked rye bread really come through on it.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising because I think when you think rye, you think instantly you're going to go in and get a big whiff of like peppercorn or spiciness or something. And I don't really, there is a little bit, but it's not like Matt said. It's got those brighter notes to it, the grassiness, the graininess a little bit, but nothing. John, what do you think? How'd Matt do?
No, I think he did a great job. That's one thing I love about our rye is it has all those notes. As he was saying, like a little bit of floral, a little bit of sweetness, and that underlining sweetness is what I really think makes a rye a little bit different. Because even on the mouthfeel, it's a little bit sweeter mouthfeel, and it just reminds you somewhat of a bourbon rather than a rye. So we always tell people we are a bourbon drinker's rye. Like even as barrel strength, we just get a lot of sweeter notes off of our rye instead of that kind of like minty spice.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we'll talk about the palate here in just a few more minutes. But on the nose on it, it's very, very nice. Just a pleasant all around nose on that one for sure. Really enjoy that. So John, let's talk about you, man. You are like the jack of all trades here. And we're going to talk about what you were doing yesterday. We can throw that in here in just a little while as well. But you're kind of into just a little bit of everything. So tell us your background and, where you're from and how you got into what you're doing.
Yeah, I always just tell people, right place, right time. Born and raised right here in Louisville, Kentucky. So, always had a little bit of knowledge of bourbon, fell in love with it. Bartended for a little bit around here too as well. Ran into Caleb, the master distiller there at Kentucky Peerless, and we just kind of bonded through mutual friends. And I remember just one day he was just like, "You wanna come work for the distillery?" He's like, "I think you'd really be great at it."
Wow.
And I was just like, "You know what? He's like, no hard feelings if you don't like it." He's like, you don't have to stick around. And I went down there and never left. Like, I mean, like when you walk into a place and you smell that fresh mash right on site, see the still running, everything. It just, I knew I wanted to be there.
Very nice. So you're a bartender. So you had some experience in the industry as a whole, but hadn't really worked at a brand or for a brand. Matt, see, there's hope, man. We always talk about Matt going into the industry. So it's just,
who knows?
It's putting yourself in the right place at the right time, right? Yeah.
Something like that. I think it's more fortuitous than putting yourself there. I mean, if everybody knew how to be at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, there you go. But that's really cool. So when you started with them, what capacity? I mean, you just came in and like, hey, I'm here.
Let's stole my question.
Sorry.
No, that's great. It's a good question. I was going to ask that.
Yeah, when I first started there, we didn't have product out, so we were still letting product age. We only do bourbon and rye. So we had some what we called moonshine out at the time.
Oh, okay.
So my first task there was climbing through the rick house and like opening up windows or painting the back dock, giving tours, things like that. And I always just tell people, I just never said no to anything because we were still young. We were still trying to, build a team together there. And it's a craft distillery, so you get a lot more hands-on experience, compared to working to a bigger distillery. So it was, hey, you want to fill barrels? Hey, do you want to learn how to cook? And I'll never forget when we had product become of age. I literally was just walking through the tasting room. Caleb and Nick, one of our other distillers, they're like, we have so much to taste, but we really don't know like who's going to help taste this stuff. Because we like our Michelob Ultra and some of those beers. So and I was like, I got a little bit of experience. Can you mind if I taste it? And he was like, yeah. Now tell me your tasting notes. So we went through it. And I'll never forget, he just looked at me and said, why don't you just come back tomorrow? He's like, we got plenty more to taste through. And I just remember falling in love, helping him curate the samples, doing some of the barrel selections. And then eventually he asked me if I would like to run the program.
Very cool. So your official title is the Single Barrel Curator.
Correct.
I like that. We were talking about that off air before we started, the title Curator. So you kind of got to make that up yourself. You got to come up with that title. Yeah,
they were like, what do you want to call yourself? And I was just thinking about everyone else in the industry that does. I'm like, well, what can I call that? It's a little bit different. Sounds a little bit more cooler, I guess. So
yeah.
Cordell Lawrence is like, why don't we call you the Single Barrel Curator? And I was like, perfect.
That perfect.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, you could be like Jane Bowie when she was at Maker's Mark. She was the director of innovation and master of maturation. It's like, you can't even fit all that shit on a card. I mean,
before that, I was we like to call ourselves sensory specialists.
Yeah,
was the title beforehand.
So tell for our listeners, just so they understand, obviously sounds like you've done a little bit of everything there at the distillery, and I'm sure you probably still are involved hands-on because you are, like you said, you're kind of a smaller shop,
there's only about 26 of us. So, occasionally I'll run the still, whether it's just opening up, shutting it down. I always tell people, I don't consider myself a distiller. I know how to turn some knobs and press a few buttons and get some stuff running, but, it was all designed by our master distiller, Caleb, and he's kind of taught us, each one of us, how to run the still.
That's just really cool. What a great opportunity to be in a situation like that where, you're not plugged into just one role. That's what you do day after day, but you get exposure to a lot of different things, sounds like.
Rolling barrels, filling them, doing the cooks, and then, helping out with any marketing work, going out doing tastings, things like that. So, it's so much fun. You never know, what the week by week it's going to be.
So does it feel, obviously it's a job. Does it feel like you're working all the time, or does it feel like, or at times you kind of pinch yourself and say, like, man, how in the world did I end up getting to do this?
The last one, definitely. I sometimes I talked to a good buddy of mine, Brandon. He is at Bardstown Bourbon Company. Brandon Smith.
Yeah.
I always like talking to him. I'm like, man, can you believe this? What we get to do some days? It's literally even my worst day is still one of my best days. And it's so I wouldn't say I always feel like I'm working because I enjoy it. So it's not like an on and off switch sometimes. It just, all right, man, what's today's adventure? What are we going to go out and do? I love talking about bourbon, love the people you meet in the industry. So
very cool. So
that's so advantageous to the distillery to have employees that know have their hands a little bit in everything. Because, for instance, we see you out at events doing marketing. It's one thing to be able to have a sheet memorized and tell everybody, this is what you're drinking, this is why you're drinking it, but also to be able to say, oh, well, I was rolling a barrel. This thing gave me a splinter like you wouldn't believe. Just to have the stories, have the connections.
Look
within
at this infection I got right there.
But no, they have the connections
right.
within the industry and within your distillery itself, and be able to tell people, like, give them boots on the ground experience. Like, I'm not just here as a pretty face to sell bourbon. Like, we do it all.
Yeah, and that's one thing I enjoy. Like, people come in the distillery and I'll be back working in production. Or I remember, like, the first barrel I ever filled, they let us write our names on it. And we'll, like, keep track of it, want to taste it when it becomes of age.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, it's a good time. We're family owned. Corky and Carson Taylor own 100% of it. His great grandfather started. So we're just very lucky that the atmosphere and the people, that we all just work well together. There's only about 26, 27 of us that work there. Mm-hmm. So it's a fun time.
So when did you start working?
I've been there now for about probably about 6 years.
6 years, okay. Yeah. So you kind of yourself, you are kind of a bourbon personality. There are people in the industry that they kind of just blend in and they're there, but you are a personality. You've got the beard, you wear the hat, so people recognize you and people know who you are. So do you run into that? When you're out and about, when you're not on Peerless time and you're just out, are people like, oh, hey, I know you. You're that bourbon dude.
Sometimes, but not as often. I figure like people may think happen. No, because a lot of us know each other here in the city. Louisville's like a big little city, but we always enjoy running into each other. But sometimes, depending on if we have the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, I had people come up and say, I know you don't know me, but I follow you on Instagram. And so that was pretty cool. Like I said, I feel blessed to be able to do what I do for a living, and it's just a lot of fun.
That's really cool. It's got to be a lot of fun. It's got to be better than being a damn attorney. I can tell you that much for sure, right, Matt?
Hey, someone's got to do it some days.
But I was going to ask you a question. We kind of got sidetracked, and that's our fault. But the title, Single Barrel Curator, can you because we talk about all the different things you do, but in that official capacity, a Single Barrel Curator, can you tell our listeners what that means and what that job entails? Yeah,
I always tell people, I think it's one of the best jobs down there. Being a distiller and everything, it's cool. It's a lot of fun. But, I get to pull samples, basically. Barrels become of age. Caleb will hand me a list or get a list together, say, hey, we need to go pull samples. We need some of these barrels, and let's start tasting through them. So basically, I get to help taste and facilitate the tasting of all the barrels when they become of age with Caleb and Nick, one of our other distillers, and we'll run through, grade, and taste all the barrels and help decide, which ones are going to be put in batches. The really special, unique ones, those are the ones I'll put into the barrel program and put them in front of groups as, yourselves, bars, restaurants, sure. Anybody wanting to purchase their private barrel for whatever reason.
So are those barrels, kind of leads to another question on that, are they barrels that are what maybe you would consider to be off profile of what a standard profile would be, but they're unique that someone would be like, oh, man, I've got to get this barrel. Yeah,
and that's why I love the barrel program, because you literally get to taste some of the most unique whiskeys. Things that may be a little out of realm for what people typically like, maybe like in a bourbon, but it's just so good that you can't blend that. You want somebody to come in that knows your product a little bit, say they know, your base core, like your small batch. Right. And then I really love presenting these barrels like, all right, you like our small batch, but taste this one. And it's like one of the best jobs, I feel like, because you get to taste some of the most unique whiskey.
Well, I know Christy brought over a bottle months ago, and I think it was called Jelly Donut or Jelly Breakfast, something. I can't remember what that...
I forget which one it was, but that's one of the best parts, too, about the job is, after we have a couple pours, we have Peyton Beal. She works at Kentucky Peerless, and she's great with names. So she'll come in, help taste the ones we've, narrowed down,
right.
And she'll be like, all right, we need to call it this. And it's just, but, a lot of names get shot down, though, too,
Sure. Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun.
But that one, it was like, as you taste it, you're like, yeah, I kind of get like a little bit of a jam or a fruit jelly on this one. And yeah, it's kind of sweet, like a glazed donut. It was just crazy. It's like, this name is absolutely appropriate for this single barrel. So that was really cool.
Yeah, he's got a great palate too. Being able to taste with him, and what's so unique about our style that when we do it, everyone has a veto power. So everyone has different palates. So it's always nice to do everything a little bit in a team effort. To really, I think why the program is so good too is just because we have several different palates tasting and deciding which ones go into it. Yeah, very, very nice. Matt, speaking of tasting, let's jump back over to the rye. What do you pick up in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
Well, I got to ask a quick question before we
get... Sorry, Matt.
So with So you blend your small batches like very small, 8 to 10 barrels. Is that correct?
About 20 to 30.
20 to 30. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're pretty dynamic. They don't really follow like it's not like we're at Buffalo Trace where we know that Buffalo Trace is going to taste the same way every single time. So as a single barrel curator and the manager of the program, is it ever kind of difficult knowing that your small batch product can kind of change over time to be able to still kick out these crazy, amazing barrels for the program?
Not really, just because, Caleb, he does such a great job when selecting these barrels for the batches that while they may be, they are different from another, and that's also what we love about the small batch too, is tasting them side by side, figuring out what little nuances are different from the other one. But really, I take it as a little bit of a blessing too, because then we are getting uniquer flavor profiles in our single barrels as well, as it continues to age and sit in there. So I wouldn't say it affects it really too much. If anything, it just makes our small batch more exciting, because people are going to be chasing after like their favorite batch or, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Matt, what are you getting?
Yeah, so speaking of the tasting here.
Speaking of the tasting, Matt, back to my original question. But that was a great question. That's actually one that I had on the list, Matt.
Oh, really?
You jumped ahead, but
sorry.
But that was your original question from like shows ago, right? So
anyway,
I steal it. So what do you get on the palate and finish on this?
The palate's got a real nice rye spice right forward, that cracked rye grain again. I think it's like takes me back to the days of working in a bakery. That rye bread comes forward real nice. And it's got like a zesty, like a lime or a zesty citrus that really opens up, and then some of the spice. And then the finish is really coming through with chocolate for me. You get a lot of like nice dark chocolate on the back end of the palate with it.
And Matt, we were talking about this yesterday about and I don't know if you were part of that conversation. I was telling somebody that Matt comes up with these tasting notes, and I'm like, what? And then it's like, oh shit, Matt was right. So the chocolate, I was like, nope, didn't taste it. But then when you said it, I'm like, no, I do. There's a hint. But it's funny because, on the nose, I'm like, okay, yes, we talked about it having that the grassiness and whatnot, that it wasn't that spiciness. And then on the taste, though, it's like, man, that rye really, sorry, I'm getting attacked by a fruit fly over here or something. But that rye, it really comes through. There's a lot of spiciness to me, almost very peppercorn-like, and even maybe transitioning a little over to cinnamon, some sweetness too, like almost some vanilla comes through. Very unique.
And that's one thing I think makes our rye so unique, is because it's so complex but simple. You get that wave of flavor that goes across the palate. It's got great viscosity because of the oils that we keep in there from non-chill filtering. And I just think it's, a little bit different than the ryes typically, we maybe grew up drinking like at first,
right.
Because a lot of us, think of Old Overholt, great product, but just two different flavor profiles. Yeah,
and this is good. I was trying to slur this around in my glass, what I have left, just to see how sticky it was, and I threw it all over the table as well. But it clings to the glass, nice legs, just beautiful color as well. Usually forgot to talk about that, but really looks nice in the glass. But very nice finish on it too. It lingers so well on the palate. It's just, it goes on and on and on, but very complex, like you said. But different on the nose to the palate to me. That was kind of surprised that when I took that first sip and I could really get that spiciness, I was like, oh, well, there it is. It's a rye. It's a rye. But I think you said earlier that it's kind of like a bourbon drinker's rye.
Yeah.
So you get that. Yeah.
It's like I said, it's a little bit, we call it Kentucky style rye, so a little bit lower content,
sure.
Which helps the corn shine through a little bit too in there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Matt, so what do you think, man?
I think it's excellent.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, and it's awesome that you're doing this. This was 10, what did you say, 108?
108.6 maybe.
108, yeah. So very nice, man. But it's not, it's not burning me up. That's what's really cool about it. And that may go to that sweet mash. We'll talk about the sweet mash process in the second round. But at 108, I think some people would think, oh my gosh, that's going to be so hot. But it's really not.
It's nice going down on the back end. It doesn't give you that, what I call that Kentucky hug.
Yep.
You get a little bit of warmness in there, but
yeah, but there's no burn going down the esophagus. Like, it's just very pleasant. This is one, Matt, I'm thinking this could cause a lot of problems. Start sipping on this.
It will sneak up on you.
Half a bottle later, you're like, oh, how'd that happen? Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good first segment. So I think we should probably take a break here and transition, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with John Wadell with Kentucky Peerless in just a minute.
Three Chords line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity.
The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The 3-Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they called Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.3chordbourbon.com.
Spirits of French Lick crafts their spirits using only the finest agricultural product that has defined character, following their motto, respect the grain. They lead the way in representing the quality of the Hoosier artisan distilling process while paying tribute to its inseparable past. By implementing best practices from those early times, combined with modern touches, Spirits of French Lick has created a truly unique place in the industry. Spirits of French Lick products are distributed throughout Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, and can also be purchased online through Sealbox at sealbox.com. Visit spiritsoffrenchlick.com to learn more information and make sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram. All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me live today on location in beautiful, sunny downtown Louisville at Repeal Steakhouse is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing over there, man?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing really great.
Good. We're having a good time, aren't we?
You know we are.
We're drinking. We're on location. I mean, this is great. We got a great guest. This is a lot of fun.
I know. I feel very fortunate. It's like we're being put up today.
Yeah.
We've had the red carpet rolled out.
We are putting on the Ritz today. We are in the fancy Repeal Steakhouse over here in Louisville.
Barrel Room.
In the Barrel Room, that's right. We are in the Barrel Room, the private dining area. And Lauren Jenny, who set all this up for us, works with the group. She told us when we came up here, she's like, if it's too noisy, you can close those curtains. And they had these big brown, dark curtains. And I thought, man, if we close those off, we're going to sit up here and fall asleep. So we're going to leave those open. We're going to enjoy the background noise so you guys can hear things going on. It's really neat. They've got a balcony that goes over into the restaurant. So I'm sure you guys can hear a little bit of that background noise. But we're having a lot of fun sitting up here in the Barrel Room. Drinking today. Matt, we got a great guest. You want to tell everybody who we have with us?
Absolutely. Joining us back for round number 2 is John Wadell, and he is the single barrel curator at Kentucky Peerless. John, welcome back for round 2.
Having a good time.
Awesome. And thanks for sticking around, man. You didn't leave. We appreciate that.
It's pretty cool up here. I mean, it really reminds me of like medieval times, like up in here.
Yeah. It's like you're in this wild castle bunker thing or whatever. I mean, there's brick everywhere. And the lighting even has that effect, right? It's almost you could expect to see just a flicker, like there'd be flames or something on the wall, like candles or something.
I want to watch a couple episodes of Game of Thrones or something while they sit up here.
Pull those curtains. I'm sure we could do that. And then like curl up and if they had a sofa, I probably would just curl up here and take a little snooze.
Some good steak, a couple glasses of whiskey. Yeah,
man. That would be great. Well, John, thanks for hanging out with us today. We appreciate it. We're actually recording on a Sunday, which is odd for us, and we appreciate you taking the time out of the weekend and knowing your hectic schedule. I mean, we just were with you yesterday or saw you yesterday at Bourbon on the Banks in Frankfurt, so you're obviously a very busy guy, man, so we appreciate you taking the time. And by the way, I was going to say first round, I think I saw on Instagram, it was just your birthday. Is that right?
Yeah, Thursday.
Yeah.
Big 3-6.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy belated birthday. I'm glad that we were able to sit here and drink your whiskey with us.
It's actually, I've been pretty busy. It's like the first day I've been able to just kind of relax, sit around, have a couple pours.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad you're able to do that with us, man. We really, really appreciate that.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot. And we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Repeal Steakhouse for this episode. So we appreciate them and coming to you live from the Barrel Room here at the Repeal Steakhouse. So, John, you want to tell everybody, we've got something else poured up for us this round. You want to tell everybody what we have poured up here?
Yeah, so this is our bourbon small batch. It's 108.1 proof, I believe. And this is the bourbon same thing, kind of like the rye. This is a small batch between 20 and 30 barrels, anywhere between 4 to 7 year old product that we'll use to mingle inside each and every batch.
All right. So now, were you distilling the rye first, or were you actually distilling the bourbon?
We started off with doing a little bit of both. So, the first thing we started with was bourbon, and then we switched over like pretty quickly to rye because we knew, it's going to age faster. It's going to be ready quicker. Mm-hmm. But now we try to trade off and do about equal amounts every year.
Okay. All right. But you were able to put the rye out first. Is that right?
Yeah, the rye came out in July of 2017 as a 2-year-old rye.
Okay. Yeah. Very nice though, man. And so Matt, let's talk about the bourbon. What are you picking up in terms of the nose?
Absolutely. The first thing I really picked up was a lot of marshmallow. The sweetness of the marshmallow and like kind of that nice cornstarch that you get on the outside of the marshmallow. I really quite like that part of a marshmallow myself. But then there's also a nuttiness. There's some peanut or like a sweet nut brittle on the nose as well that I pick up with this.
Yeah, I can see that. I get a little bit of oak on it too. So it's not super old. It's not like a 15-year-old whiskey, but you're still able to pull out a little bit of that oak, and you're coming out. I mean, this is not proof down, so I mean, this is coming straight out of the barrel. So, not a surprise to pick up a little bit of those notes, I guess, as well. So, John, what about you, man? What do you get in terms of the?
No, I love the marshmallow note. And to me, what makes our bourbon too is just once again the complexity of it. You get the marshmallows. To me, I get a lot of dark fruit, but a little bit of like tropical fruit too as well in the bourbon. But hats off to Caleb once again. On putting together these batches. It's not something that's quick and easy for us because we use so few barrels. Every barrel plays a major role in the batch.
Yeah.
It's not like we have like I call filler barrels. Ones that are like, oh, we can just add it in. We'll be able to add some other stuff in with it. So each barrel is hand selected that goes into these, and we'll start by adding about 3 or 4 barrels together, letting it sit for a couple of days, trying it, seeing, then adding on from there, kind of see what it needs.
Very nice. We've had like Sean Josephs with Pinhook, and he talked about their blending process and how they'll go through and pick barrels, and they'll put barrels in different categories. Like this one, these have this type of taste to them, and this has this type of taste. And then as they start blending, it's like, oh, we need a little more maybe of this flavor. Is that kind of the same process? Do you guys kind of do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. They'll taste it and maybe decide like, hey, it's a little bit too floral for a bourbon. Like, let's find some sweeter barrels.
Sure.
Add them in there. And like I said, it's amazing. We get to go through, start tasting through some samples and trying to figure out which ones we're going to add in. Which, on the nose on this, it does have that kind of like burnt marshmallow with a little bit of like sweet tobacco there on the nose too as well, which the building we're in, I always tell people it was a very well-seasoned building. It's an old tobacco warehouse is what it originally was. So, it's had tobacco aging and curing in there and everything else.
And it's a cool building. I've been by it. It's a really, really unique, very cool structure. I need to go visit Matt. We need to make that happen sometime.
I actually have.
You have? Well, see, Matt, then where was I? What the?
This was before we had met.
Oh, okay. It was,
before I saw the light.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoy the nose on this one. Very, very nice. Like Matt, the descriptors, the marshmallow.
And I think more is like I was talking about fruit. To me, it gives like, I don't remember like that zebra stripe gum. Toys R Us used to have that, flavor lasted about 15 seconds. Like it just got that kind of like bubble gum kind of fruity nose to it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. When Matt said the cornstarch, it made me think, because sometimes I talk about Topps baseball card packs. They had that pink gum. You open it up, it was all crumbly, but it had that cornstarch on it.
Oh, yeah.
But it had that sweet aroma to it. So that was kind of reminiscent of that for me, is that kind of that Topps. It sounds weird to say. It reminds me of Topps baseball cards, but that gum in there.
I love how you reference like that, because some people ask like, like what's like a good starting point? Like how do you learn how to know? I'm like, don't always focus on what you're smelling, but where does it take you? As you said, like bubblegum cards, right? So that always sometimes helps you pinpoint flavors or things like that, or aromas that you're getting.
Yeah, don't ask me about the leather and chewing on my baseball glove when I was a kid, because we'll get there at some point, I'm sure. So, John, let's talk about the distillery itself. So let's talk about the creation of it and the idea behind it and how it all got started. Yeah,
so the original distillery was started by Corky's great grandfather Henry Craver back in 1889. He was from Poland, so he came over to like New York, like lived in the Manhattan area when he was like 5 years old. By the time he was 9, 10, he was a very young entrepreneur selling newspapers on the corner, just trying to make a buck. And when he was a teenager, he got on a riverboat, right? Can you imagine getting on a river back in those days? Took all of his money with him, and the family said he decided that wherever he ran out of money is where he was going to get off at. So out of all places, he ends up in Henderson, Kentucky. If you're not familiar with that, it's just about 2 hours west of here of Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville's a much bigger town, especially at that time. No one really knows why he passed up Louisville, but the family said he was also a party animal. So they said he was probably drunk, gambling, or sleeping on the boat. That's why he missed the stop at Louisville.
Yeah.
But he missed the stop, ended up in Henderson, Kentucky. When he got off the boat, you got to think no money, no place to live. He was able to live in this bar called Puckett's in Henderson, Kentucky, till he got back on his feet. And in 2 years, he had enough money, he purchased the bar Puckett's. So he was a banker by trade, though. So he sat on the board about 6 different banks, started the first national bank in Henderson, Kentucky, which Corky still owns a little piece of today.
Okay.
And he had tobacco warehouses, hotels. He owned the Palmer Hotel in Chicago for a little bit of time, lived there too as well. Partied with Al Capone, supposedly, drank with him.
Well, wow. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
That's very, very impressive.
And then he had a daughter, Helena Craver. She married Roy Taylor Sr., so that's where the Craver name drops off, and you have the Taylor name pick up. He was part of the Zachary Taylor family, which is our 13th president.
Okay.
And they kind of ran the distillery, took care of the day-to-day operations. We also had a brewery as well, Henderson Brewing Company, which we still own the rights to today. But Corky says he'll leave that up to the grandkids if they want to do. If they want to do and eat beer, we'll just stick to whiskey and bourbon. But they had a son, Roy Taylor Jr., Corky's father. Sadly, he was never part of the distillery life. I say sadly, but he was kind of a pretty awesome guy. He went to military school at Castle Heights in Lebanon, Tennessee, from 5 years old till he was 18. But that was just because at that time, you got to think Henry Craver was a Polish Jew living in Henderson, Kentucky. So there were some threats on the family, the business and stuff. So that's why they sent the grandson to Castle Heights. But when he graduated, rather than going back to the distillery life or anything like that, World War II was going on. So he went over there, became General Patton's chief aide, was his right-hand man all during World War II. He was even he was in Korea. He was the first officer in Vietnam. He was out there on the battleships during the Bay of Pigs. So he spent his whole life in the military. So Corky grew up in Hawaii, surfing the beaches, 13, 14 years old. You can imagine what that life would have been like.
Oh, man. How awful that would be.
Yeah.
Terrible. Sounds terrible. But his father decided to retire. They were going to move back to Henderson, but he told Corky, don't get too excited because guess where you're going? Castle Heights Military Academy.
Oh.
Now, Corky was lucky. He only spent about 3 years there, though, before he was kindly asked to leave. But supposedly he got in a lot of trouble. His 2 main roommates, they were 2 blonde-headed boys. Their father had passed away during Korea. They were called Greg and Dwayne Allman, the Allman brothers.
No way.
If you know
Are you
those guys.
serious? Yeah.
Greg Allman even wrote a book that talks about Corky in this book. They figured out that all the ladies were hanging out at Dairy Queen on Sundays, so they sneak out every Sunday and go join them. But in the book, in order to get money, Corky would take toothpicks and he would soak them in cinnamon oil and then sell them for like 10 cents a piece around school, and that's how they get the money to go out to Dairy Queen. And they got caught a lot of times, got in a lot of trouble. So about 3 years is all he lasted there.
Yeah, it's like, get out of here, man. You're done.
Yeah, but sadly, Prohibition came along. The distillery shut down, and it wasn't until about 100 years later, till Corky had already was retired, and said it was the most depressed he had ever been in his life. Said he had to get back to work. So he decided that he would get his youngest son, Carson, who's our president, and they would basically revive the family legacy, the distillery. Obviously, we set up shop here in Louisville. Just made more sense rather than being in Henderson. So we decided to choose Whiskey Row. We're right off 10th and Main in an old tobacco warehouse where now we operate and do everything right out of that building.
Yeah, and I've not been there, Matt, so you can tell everybody what it's like.
It's awesome. It has that warehouse feel to it.
It's very hands-on, which I like. It's not like a bunch of mirrors, guardrails, or, plexiglass up. I mean, you get to see the whole shebang when you come down there.
Yeah, I think we did like a tasting or something and went up to a private room somewhere that they had just cleared someone out, and they're like, well, we were serving them this, you can have this. And so we were tasting it. It was super fun. And at the end, they led us down some back staircase, through the distillery itself, through the production process and everything. They're like, well, you got to clear out real quick. We got some a truck coming in a couple minutes. So just hop out through this door or something. But anyway, yeah, super cool, really hands-on, no big pretentious feel, a lot of character.
Oh, thank you.
Really liked that.
Corky's son Carson, he did a lot of work. He used to be a builder. So, rather than hire a bunch of contractors, he brought his own Bobcat bulldozer, gutted it right down to the raw beams, and kind of designed and hung up everything, framed everything.
Wow. That's so obviously Corky had this entrepreneurial, even though his dad was military, but I mean, he comes from, the entrepreneurial standpoint, right? So he had that in his blood.
Oh, yeah. I like to call him Corky Gump because, he knows everyone from like different time periods of his life. Like he's met so many fascinating people, but he used to own a financial company called Bencor. I mean, used to manage over $1 billion and had over 2,000 employees, right? Started the business here in Louisville, Kentucky, down off 4th Street in a broom closet, as he says.
Oh, man.
Grew it, took it to Sarasota. And now he said he went from wearing blue jeans and a T-shirt and managing 26 employees, and he couldn't be happier.
Well, I mean, obviously he's doing a great job. There's no doubt about it because you guys are very successful. And even though it's, like you said, 25, 26 people, I mean, it's great. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So let's talk about your master distiller, which he doesn't really like to be called master distiller from what I understand. Is that right?
Oh, he hates it. But, he had no idea it was coming. Corky and Carson, we presented him with that, I think about COVID really draws like a black hole in your memory when it comes to dates and times.
What happened?
I think it's about 3-4 years ago, they gave him the title.
Yeah. And he's very young. I mean, in terms of distiller, talk, I mean, you think of a master distiller, you picture these guys that are old.
Yeah, and that's what he always says. He says people like Jimmy Russell.
And that's I just had Jimmy Russell in my head as I was describing. I could just picture Jimmy sitting there at the distillery. That's who I had in my head when I was saying that. And no disrespect to him, he is older. He's an old man, right? So. But when you think of master distiller, that's kind of the image it conjures up in your mind, I think.
It's to me, it's always the first person that comes to mind when someone says it, And
Jimmy Russell.
And Caleb knows that. I mean, he says the same thing. But Corky and Carson, they were very proud of the stuff he had put out. When the rye came out at 2 years old, Caleb said, "All right, I got 2 more years of job security, because the bourbon hadn't been out yet." He's like, "I at least got 2 more years here before." But we won a couple awards early on, but we still are pretty humble about it. We're always trying to improve and do anything that we can to increase production or make a better product.
And he started with the distillery when I think he was, would you say 20?
It's like 20 or 21. He was, people always say, I was there at the ground floor. I mean, he was running a jackhammer, pulling nails, crawling in and out of stuff, and driving, and keep in mind, he was still going to school. So he was driving back and forth about a 2-hour drive, like every other day after class to come work at the distillery.
Wow.
Do anything he could there.
Yeah, well, kudos to him, man, for sticking to it. And that's, it's like the original founder of the distillery, somebody that starts with not a whole lot and works hard and raises up through the ranks and becomes successful at it.
Not a lot of distillers, I feel like, can say, like, not only are they, the master distiller or the head distiller, but, he had a very big role of setting up the whole operation there, laying the pipe fitting down, deciding on, what still to go with, how big, like things you wouldn't even think about, like diameters, how much steam feed compared to, it's just, he really was very hands-on and got to create something very special there.
Yeah. And off air, I think you said that he actually grew up on was it a dairy farm?
A dairy farm, like out in Salt Lake, Kentucky. So he was always around mechanics, working on pipe fittings and things like that.
So it's kind of second nature to him, but things that I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, but I didn't grow up on a farm. So things I wouldn't think about, but just really cool that he had that experience and was able to transfer it over into the whole distilling process.
He's a smart guy, so being someone of his caliber and working around with some of us who don't have, some like a chemistry degree, we're familiar with the process, but, we'll do what we call like chalk talk. And sometimes I know he looks at us and we're looking at him. He knows we're like, what did he just say? But but once again, that's a great thing about being at a craft distillery is the hands-on training you get. I mean, I literally get to work with this man every day and, ask any questions, learn anything. When there's boiler problems, he's fixing it. He's calling people in. So it's so cool to see some of that stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's jump back a little bit and talk about the blending process. Matt had asked a great question earlier, but in terms of the actual overall process, how many people are actually involved with that, what comes out to be the final product?
Well, Caleb is our master, so he gets, final judgment say, especially on these small batches, because they're a representation of, his palate, his skills, but he does a great job at including, anybody and everybody almost that wants to be a part of it or at least learn more. So him, myself, Nick, we have a couple of like Peyton Beal. We'll help taste barrels along with them, and we'll kind of get his judgment of what the batch needs, and so it's really a learning process for all of us. But Caleb plays a great part and pretty much the final deciding factor on what barrels go into the batches.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, it's great that it's inclusive, that everybody, you guys all get to be involved with it, and you can veto it if you want to, and and Caleb obviously has final say, but it's a unique process. That's really nice that it's, I think in a lot of these bigger distilleries, there's that set process. It just goes this way, and it is what it is, right?
That's a great thing. He's always open and listening, and there's plenty of times where you have discussion. He doesn't just, discard it, even if he doesn't agree. Like, he'll talk back, well, why do you think that? Like, what?
That's nice. He challenges you to bring it forward.
And I think he enjoys it too as well, because I think he loves teaching just as much as, doing everything else.
Yeah. I had a chemistry professor in high school who had a doctorate. I don't know why he was teaching high school, but his favorite saying was justify your answer. So in a conversation or whatever in class, you'd give him an answer, but then he would look at you and he'd be like, well, can you justify your answer? And you're like, hell, I don't know. I just read it in the book, but that was never good enough. You had to know, more and explain why, right?
Oh yeah. I remember when I was learning the still with him and Nick Klee, he's our pretty much morning guy, gets everything up running. When you're learning that, they necessarily won't tell you if you're right or wrong. They'll ask you, like, well, why would you do that? And then you're like, So, they want you to make sure you have the confidence and understanding of exactly, what's going on. And I always remember, like, that was, like, the biggest thing. Like, I'm like, all right, I know he's not going to tell me if I'm right or wrong. He's going to ask me why I did this.
I mean, it's good in a way. It's scary as hell, I think, in a way, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're messing with $1 million piece of equipment, and they're just like, yeah, come on in. Like, all right, now go fire up the boiler, and we're going to let it pressure on your salt. Like, I mean, it was... I remember the first couple of days, I was so nervous.
Yeah,
and they're like, it's not going to blow up. Like, we have automatic shutdown system if you do anything wrong.
Yeah, you got to go stand beside it after you push all the buttons just to make sure nothing's going to go wrong. See how secure you are in your decision.
And I tell you what, turning on those pipes too in the morning when you're turning on your steam and everything and those clanking and stuff, it can be a little scary. You're like, all right, did I do something wrong? But you get used to the noises too inside of there.
You're like Will Ferrell in Elf. He's like, there's a thing. It's making a hideous noise. It's
the radiant.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah. And it was a fun process, and I think, like I said, they enjoyed just as much as training people on it as well.
Very cool, Matt. Let's jump over and talk about the palate on this this bourbon that we got here, this small batch. What do you think?
Sure deal. I get a little bit of honey right on the front.
I was just gonna say honey, a little bit of honey.
There's a sweetness right on the front, and then it's like it lends to like a biscotti, an almond type biscotti type sweet cracker with it. Yeah. And then John, you were talking about those dark fruits. I get the red wine fruits are coming through on the palate with this one a lot. I get the dark little cherry, some of the dark grapes, maybe a little currant as well.
So that biscotti, because you talked about on the nose that you're picking up a little bit of nuttiness. Is that, you think that's kind of transitioning from that nuttiness on the nose to the biscotti flavor in the palate?
I don't know if it's power persuasion, but that biscotti is like point on.
So this would be great in coffee, is what you're saying. I'm just right.
Yeah,
dip a little of your bourbon in your coffee.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I agree, Matt. And it's another great profile. There's a little bit of spiciness on this one too on the palate, which is I really like that. But Matt, like you said, on the nose you're getting that marshmallowy sweetness. And then on the palate, you kind of get that little bit of a spicy kick. It's a really nice combination of factors. You get that sweetness as well. Very nice. John, what about you?
No, yeah, and I like to say it's got a little bit of that like a chocolatey tobacco, but like I'm huge on tobacco notes. I think we get so much tobacco notes out of our bourbon. But I just love the mouthfeel, and it makes me salivate a little bit, like at the end, like when you're like smacking your lips. So it's definitely a great product. And like I said, you get so used to tasting it for 4 or 5 years that it really is fun to see how they transition from year to year.
Yeah, and again, this one was like 108.1, I think, or something like that. So, and drinkability, again, crazy.
And hats off, we use Kelvin cooperage for our barrels. I mean, obviously we make great distillate, but, Kelvin cooperage, they're so old school about their process. Sure. So they don't use infrared or gas. It's all the leftover oak, so it's natural fire they use on their barrels. And we do a medium toast with a level 3 char level inside of all of them. And I think it just is better in the long run.
Yeah, I was good. That was another question that was going to be coming in the third round. So I'm glad you.
Sorry.
No, that's quite all right. That's perfect. And I tell you what, we're at the end of round 2, so probably a good stopping point. But final thoughts on the bourbon, Matt?
Loving it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, both things so far. We got 2 more to go that we're going to drink up in this next final round. But let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with John Wadell, the single barrel curator with Kentucky Peerless, in just a minute.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, live on location today in downtown Louisville at the Barrel Room of Repeal Steakhouse. We're having a great time today. Matt, how are you doing over there?
Mark, I'm doing so great. This has been a good day so far.
It's been a good day.
Anytime we can take the show on the road, get to see some new places and
meet some not meet new friends, but hang out with,
help tell some stories.
Yeah, and share some great stories and share some great pours. That's, to me, that's the most important part of it, right? Getting to share pours and share those stories. So, Matt, you want to tell everybody who we have with us? Absolutely.
We have John Wadell, and he is the single barrel curator from Kentucky Peerless, and he's back for round 3. And we have got a full packed round 3 here.
Yeah, we do.
So let's waste no time. John, what's the first thing we've got poured up?
So the first one I brought here, this is our Double Oak Small Batch. It's 108.4 proof. Just came out 2 weeks ago, same weekend as KBF, Bourbon Beyond.
Oh, okay.
It was a crazy weekend. So this is our second year of putting this out. Same thing, it's about a mingle of about 20, 30 barrels that were double oaked that Caleb put together for a batch.
Okay. And in terms of double oaking, because, different people have different processes when they do it. Because we've had Chris Morse on the show, we've had Jackie on the show, and Old Woodford does their double oak kind of in a different way. They use a lightly charred, heavily toasted, and Old Forester used a lightly toasted but like alligator heavily charred. So, is there specific barrels? What do you guys use for your secondary?
There is no rhyme or reason on our double oak. But it's funny. The double oak, we didn't even know it was going to be a thing. As typically any distillery experiences, sometimes you have barrels that leak or, maybe get compromised. So you have to transfer them into another brand new American oak barrel. And when we taste two barrels, we do blind. We try to keep everything out of sight. So, we're grading for the flavor profile. And we started coming across these barrels and we're like, what is this? This doesn't taste like anything we've tasted. Mm-hmm. So we go back and start looking at some of these barrels and we're like, double oaked.
Oh, I got you.
So then we started collecting, looking up any double oaks because we have it on record when you do it. And, you start going back and all right, pulled these and these samples and they were just fantastic.
Sure. I said sure again. Man,
you're all right. And you just said man anyway.
Okay. That's really cool though. So it wasn't like you set out to do this as a project. It was just, this is
straight Bob Ross, just happy little accidents,
Nice. I like that.
Happy little bourbon barrels everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Matt, what are you picking up on the nose on this one?
Well, first, let's talk about the color.
Okay. Let's talk about it.
Holy smokes, is this dark?
Yeah.
It's like the darkest of mahogany red, amber, just a beautiful, beautiful color.
That's kind of funny. I don't know if it's the lighting in here, Matt, that's giving it, it got a little oranginess or yellow to the lighting, not clear light, but it does almost have a reddish, it's almost like an Irish red ale or something. It's kind of very unique in the coloration. I really like that. So is there a specific time again, or is it just random?
Random. Okay. So, we'll taste double oaks that may have only been double oak for a year, spent, maybe 2 years in the first barrel or 3 years in the first barrel, because everything we taste now is 4 years old, and maybe just a year in the second barrel, or it could be split, or maybe just 1 year in the first barrel, depending on, when it started leaking or something happened and transfer it. So, because of that, the flavor profiles on these are wild. They're all over the place that you're going to get on some of these double oaks. And we find, once again, our whole thought process is this is exciting. People want to taste this kind of stuff outside of the small batch. We've done a couple single barrels with the double oak, and I should have brought some of those because you'd be like, to show you the flavor profiles of some of these barrels is wild.
So in the blending process, again, it's just you're taking these barrels and there's not really necessarily a set goal in mind. It's just kind of doing doing the blends and kind of ended up where you end up then, right?
Correct. But after we found out double oaks were turning out pretty well, when we started tasting through barrels, Caleb had a great mindset of, all right, well, when we taste some, because no matter what distilleries tell you, they're always going to have barrels that don't taste good. You got to be like, all right, we got to put this back. Maybe some more time. You know what? Maybe if we double oak it, maybe that might do something to it. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, we'll grade and taste barrels, and it's not because once again they're like super terrible. It's just it's lacking something in it. So maybe by putting in another barrel, we can help change that.
Oh, that makes sense. That way, waste not, want not, right?
Exactly.
If it's a barrel you can't use, or it's not going to fit the profile to go into a blend or even a single barrel program, then double oaking it or finishing it in something different can help create something very unique and special, right?
Exactly. And once again, we make really great distillate, but you never know how it's going to react with that barrel. Every barrel is so different. Every stave is not from the same oak tree per se, and it's just I want to say it's just luck of the draw. But every barrel is very unique. Every barrel tells a different story.
Now, you said earlier, you do everything on site there, right? Mm-hmm. You guys never sourced. Obviously, you did your stuff. You're making it. You have some barrels there on site, but you have off-site as well, I'm assuming? Or
yeah, we bought about 30 acres out in Henry County. Holds about 5,200 barrels there. Okay. And so we'll build a couple more out there. But, all of our rick houses are single story. So, we don't have the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 floors. We keep everything on one floor, and we go about, 5 to 6 high in each and every one. Because being here in Kentucky, you're going to have that temperature change naturally.
Right.
So for us, it's more about the airflow. How can we continue to circulate great air through these rick houses and really let these barrels breathe and age a little bit?
I'm just curious, with a single story, do you see, because is it Four Roses that does single story rick houses? I think
they may have a couple of them. I don't think
not
it's the
all
only
of them,
way.
but
yeah.
But just, do you see though variations from like rick number 1 to row number 6? Can you actually see that?
Oh yeah, believe it or not, there is 8 to 10 degrees temperature-wise difference.
Okay.
It's hard to describe and people understand, but when I'm up there pulling ricks, and you got to think I'm just 5-6 up, so you're just up by the roof basically. When you come down and to that ground floor, it is like air conditioning for maybe 2 to 3 seconds, right? Like you just feel a coolness come about you, and then it's right back to the heat. But there is a little bit of a shift change in the temperature.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, but that's really cool. Yeah. So very nice single stories, but you still get that temperature variation. So, all right, Matt, I'm sorry. I kind of jumped off topic there. I'd ask you what the nose was like, and then went down this whole rabbit hole.
Not a problem. The nose on this, a lot of that leather and tobacco we were talking about earlier, like right away, it's just a ton of leather and tobacco. As it's sitting, it's kind of mellowing out with those notes. But I got a lot of oranges. Oh. I don't know if it's just me, but there's citrus, there's orange peel and zest to it.
It's crazy. On some of our double oaks, we feel like, our palates get the same thing. Like there's, maybe it's the oak, they get all their wood. Calvin Cooperage gets all their oak from like the wetlands, so, but there's like always a huge citrus note in some of these.
Yeah, I get a lot of orange on this.
You know what it reminds me of? When I was a kid, my mom she would take an orange and she would zest it just a little bit when she would make French toast. So she'd make the batter, and then she would take an orange and she would just zest it. So the batter actually had a little bit of orange zest in it. And then we're from Eastern Kentucky, right? So we're not fancy. But my mom, for some reason, loved to do that. So as a kid, you get that French toast, you have the nice warm syrup over it, and then you have that orange zest as well. So it kind of reminds me of that. Again, going back to my childhood a little bit. But the oranges, the citrus, but then also I get like a maple syrupiness off of the nose on this one as well.
I love that orange zest with the pancake mix or the French toast mix. It's such a good descriptor.
Yeah, that's kind of what I pick up, Matt. So I'm glad you said that. But then the leather also comes through. And again, I'm not going to go back to my childhood and chewing on my leather glove when I played baseball. But yes, I do know what leather tastes like. But yeah, this really, really nice, man. Just a very pleasant. I don't want to say dessertish, but yeah, I could see, after you've had a nice filling dinner and you're sitting around with some friends, maybe smoking a cigar or something.
It's great with the cigar.
Okay, yeah, okay. So what else on the nose, John? What else do we get on this one?
Definitely like a toasted, I wouldn't say tobacco necessarily, but it's got that little bit of tobacco with like almost like a toasted oak to it a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it's funny you say about what'd you say, that the zest over the French
French
toast.
toast, yeah, in the batter. Yeah.
My mom used to make this German chocolate cake with a little bit of orange zest over top of it. It had like a little bit of sprinkled nuts on it, like roasted nuts on top.
Okay.
And that's what it's like.
Reminiscent of
where it
that,
takes me.
yeah. Isn't that fun? How bourbon? I mean, and you'd say, "Oh, it reminds me of being a kid." And people are like, "Wait, what?
What was your childhood like?
what the hell were you doing as a kid? What did your parents do to you?"
And it's I used to also, I used to love Pop-Tarts when I was in college. So I don't know if you ever had the s'more Pop-Tart, but that's also a little bit of what it reminds me of.
Yeah, very nice. I was more of a brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tart.
See, I don't trust those type of people. My brother was a brown sugar. I thought it was like the worst Pop-Tart ever.
So the people you can't trust are the ones that like no icing though.
Yeah, right. Like
you just want the regular chalky Pop-Tart with a little,
Why would you pay the same exact amount for a Pop-Tart with no icing?
Without frosting.
I don't trust those people further than I can throw them.
That's a good point. We're going to have to form a pact on that one. No, we're not going to let anybody in our group that doesn't like frosting on their Pop-Tarts, right?
Yeah, if you're going to go so far as to do the Pop-Tart thing, like just go for it.
Go for it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was not to jump into the Ironman thing, but that was my favorite part of Ironman training was because my coach was like, okay, you can have the Pop-Tarts, the brown sugar cinnamon. So on the Ironman course, that was the run especially, I'd have my little bag packed, at the halfway point when you could pick up your little bag, I'd have Pop-Tarts in there. So it was like, okay, I'm just going to walk and eat my brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts.
Nice.
All right. So enough about that, right? So let's talk about the sweet mash. You guys do sweet mash. So we've had a few people on that do that. It's a very unique process. So can you share with our listeners again, just so they understand exactly what that sweet mash process
so we do
is?
what we call a strictly sweet mash over sour mashing. So if you're familiar with sour mash, right, after each distillate, they take some of the back set of the leftover water and grains, and they'll put it back in their cooker and use it for the next cook, like a starter almost, like sourdough bread. Whereas being a strictly sweet mash, we reuse nothing after the distillation. So we're starting with fresh grains, fresh water, first generation yeast every time. So you could argue that, we're going to spend some more money just in ingredients or the recipe alone. But the big picture on why we do that, though, when you're using a strictly sweet mash and using all those fresh ingredients, during the fermentation process, you're getting the full flavor from these water and grains, right? Okay. Where sometimes, with the sour mash, can have a little bit of a leftover, like sour kind of a flavor to it. Whereas we're drawing the full flavor from the water and grains every run, which allows us to come off our still, right? We come off at a much lower proof than most distilleries. We come off around like 130, 131 proof, but we still have all that good grain quality and flavor. And it allows us to clean up the distillate a little bit better and get some of, a little bit more of those tails out of there, because tails are equally great as they are good or bad. You got to get some of them out, you keep some of them around. And it helps our distillate through the whole process.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, because that kind of answered my question too, because I was going to ask you about coming off the still at 130, because you mentioned that earlier. So obviously that's part of the whole process in the sweet mash.
Yeah,
you can come off.
The sweet mash too, it's not just about, using the fresh grains. Most people stay away from it, I feel like, and this is once again just my speculation opinion on doing it, is just because the quality of cleanliness you have to have. We use medical grade stainless steel piping, which, isn't cheap. Because between each cook and each run, your fermentators and everything, you have to deep clean. So it's not like we can just spray it out, put your next cook in there. You got to heat them up to about 210 degrees using steam, hold them for about 20 minutes, because you have to kill any leftover yeast bacteria that could possibly be left in there, because it would, in fact, contaminate the next batch if not properly sanitized. But we're the right size. Our fermenters around, 1,800 gallons. So, it's just the right size for everything to work.
Yeah. And that's what I think is always really interesting to me, is the fact that, if you don't clean it, it's obviously labor intensive. It's more expensive. It's labor intensive. You've got to clean the whole system, because if you have any bacteria left over with that sweet mash, you're going to run the risk that it's going to contaminate everything and just ruin it all. And that's kind of crazy to me. But, you talked earlier about the fact there's that Kentucky hug. You get a little warmth, but you don't get that burn. And I think, from what I've been told, I think some of that comes from the fact that it's a sweet mash. Is that accurate, or is that? No,
I think 100%, from, just talking with Cable and understanding, asking him like why sweet mash over sour mash, back in those days, they didn't really understand necessarily the yeast and, the biology behind everything. Whereas now we have a better understanding of the role that yeast plays into it.
Right.
And just knowing that you can come off at a much lower proof and still hold on to all that flavor by using a sweet mash, right? Because you're getting more flavor from your cook all the way to your fermentation and right before it's distilled too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Matt, because we got another expression to drink, so let's talk about the palate and on this double oaked. What do you think?
It's fun to compare this with just the small batch that we had, the bourbon, because I feel they drink very different.
Yeah,
it's super unique. Where the bourbon had that little touch of honey right up front, then I got a good kick of heat. This is like just smooth and sweet right through the front of the palate. A lot of chocolate, a lot of that maple syrup, the vanilla, some nutmeg, like kind of think those sweet baked breakfast type aromas. And then the heat, it slides up near the end. It kind of comes out of nowhere and it brings some of the heat, that cinnamon, that nice warmth near the end, and just real
like
nice.
Mexican chocolate is like
have
like a little bit like
Yep. That's super apt.
That's funny. That. I could feel it like crawling back up the sides of my tongue, back up into this. It's like I could feel this heat coming after the sweetness. It's like, oh, this is like desserty, very nice, very, very sweet. And then all of a sudden, it's just like that little bit of spice starts creeping back in. Yeah, very cool. Good descriptor. I like that.
Yeah, that is good.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's move on to what we got poured up next. So, John, you would tell everybody what this fourth and final expression is going to be today?
Yeah, so this is, we released this this year too as well. This is our first time ever doing this finish. This is a rum finish that we did with our bourbon.
So it's all the same. I should have said that, obviously. I mean, it's the same bourbon, right? The same mash bill, everything.
Yeah,
everything
we use the same mash bill for all the bourbon, same mash bill for all the rye. We do have some stuff coming out this year. We did do a high rye bourbon. That will come out in November with the release of our double oak rye small batch too as well.
Wow. Just answered like kind of the closing question here. What's
Sorry
next?
about that. Yeah.
No. Hey.
No, it's like a little treat, little peek behind the curtain before. Yeah, but that's great. That's good to know. Very interesting, Matt. So what are you picking up on this rum finish?
I think off air we mentioned it's got that briny nose.
Yeah,
I like that. Kind of got that sea briny quality. There's almost like tropical fruits, like a little pineapple, a little papaya, like just really sweet, inviting tropical notes with it as well. And some of that bourbon comes through too. There's like a little bit of that like pineapple upside down cake type aroma with like that.
It's a great description.
Yeah, like that vanilla comes through with it, and like everything you love out of that.
Yeah, very nice. The brininess comes through, like you said. It's like you want to be on a beach, right? It's like, can I just go somewhere nice, sit on a beach? Of course, hey, we're in a nice place, the Barrel Room at Repeal Steakhouse, right? How much nicer could you get? I mean, unless I had the ocean and some sand. But John, what about you? What do you get in terms of the nose on this one?
Well, I don't know, as I'm sitting here nosing, I mean, I feel like I'm at the ocean. I got the sand right there.
There you go. There you go.
It's like, my mom used to make an upside down pineapple cake. And I remember had like the toothpicks with the pineapple rings around it too as well. But yeah, I'd mentioned when we first poured this, like I feel like I'm by the sea. Like you can almost just smell like a little bit of that brininess with a little bit of the tropical fruit. I get a lot of like candied mango out of the nose on these.
Yeah. Very unique, very, very nice, very different. But again, you still get those, like Matt said, you get the underlying tones of that bourbon that still come through. Yeah, just very nice.
Yeah, we were tasting this yesterday. I brought a little bit of this to the Bourbon on the Banks just to let some people try. And like I said, there's a tropical like trail mix that I'll use like when I go hiking. Like I'm like, this is just what it reminds me of.
Gotcha, with the coconut dried pineapple and stuff.
Yeah, but there's like a little nutty
chocolateness to it. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. So we talked about coming off the still. You talked about going into the barrel at 107. So that's more expensive. I mean, that costs more because you're using more barrels because you're not going in at 125. So you're going in at 107. So what's the thought process behind that?
So, once again, kind of going back to the sweet mash, we chose to come off at, the great thing about using your sweet mash is you can come off your still around 130, 131 proof, a little bit lower proof because, most distilleries, if they're mass producing, 2,000, 3,000 plus barrels a day, whereas we do 10 to 12.
Okay.
You try to keep your costs down. So you'll come off still maybe around 150, somewhere around there. They'll take everything down to like 125, 130, or, and then they'll put that into the barrel. Whereas Peerless, our whole main focus was quality over quantity, right? We're never going to make the most, but how can we produce the absolute best? So we made the decision to come off the still around 130, 131 proof, take everything down to 107, and then put it in our barrels. The reason we do that is because our water becomes an ingredient, not a dilution. So we may spend a little bit more up front, by, adding your water first. You're going to make more product, so you have more barrels, more rickhousing space. But in the long run, the return is greater for us on there. Yep. And when we were trying to figure out the right number, what's the right barrelage proof? Caleb got to spend a lot of time around some of the greats, Michael Veach, Jimmy Russell, and, just talking to them, I believe the conversation went down, if I could do it the way I want it to, I'd go in between, 105 to 110. And so I think we just kind of were like, you know what?
Yeah.
107.
That's kind of a throwback, I think, in history. Back in the older, they used to go in at that around 105 to 110, right?
Correct.
That's kind of the historical average of what brands were going in at. And then 125 became the set law. So most brands were saying, okay, 125, we're going for it because it's less barrels and it's less expensive to do it that way, right?
Yeah. But, water's more soluble. It's going to help go inside those barrels and help extract more of that flavoring and coloring. And, the whole reason we even put it in the barrels is extract all that flavor and coloring. So it didn't make sense. Like, why would we want to add water to it at the end?
Right. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense because you put the water in, you let it do its thing in the barrel the whole time with the water already in there. So that makes perfect sense to me. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, and it seems your brick houses are definitely doing work. If you're coming in at 107, everything we're drinking has been like a minimum 108. Yeah. So even single-story rick houses.
And I'm happy with single stories because we don't have to rotate the barrels. So they get to stay right there because, those things are almost like 600 pounds. So I'm glad we don't have to lug those around too much. Usually when they're up there, they're up there.
Yeah, that's what I can't imagine, because we had Denny on the show talking about Maker's Mark, they had the 6 stories and they're rotating every 2 years the barrels to different floors. And I'm like, how the hell how do you even do that? I just can't imagine the work that goes into having to do that. So.
I'll definitely say winter over the summer is better. I'd much rather be cold and get warm than be hot and try to get cool.
Roasting away with the barrels.
Oh my God, yeah. Because I've been in other rick houses like 5-6 floors. This Kentucky summers are no joke. It's like 110 plus degrees up there.
Yeah, like those guys up there hanging tobacco in the barns, up there in the rafters, which I never did as a kid. Had family members that had tobacco farms, but I never was blessed or cursed, I guess, the way you look at it, to cut and stake tobacco and then have to hang it, man. I just can't imagine what it's like to do that. But yeah, it's a good example of what a rick house would be as well. Those hot summer days here in Kentucky.
And those older rick houses, the average height back then on men was like 5'6", 5'7". So it's a lot of low ceilings, entryways, and everything else in there too.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're not places for big guys like me. That's
no, yeah.
So let's talk real quick. I know we're getting to wrapping it down here, but I really want to hit on the packaging and the bottle designs because they're absolutely gorgeous. It's from across a bar, across a store, across anywhere, I can pick out these bottles. And it seems they absolutely fit with the character of everything that you all are doing. You're picking to do a sweet mash because that's what you believe is best. Is it the most profit-hungry way to go about it? No. You're doing Calvin Cooper. You're picking the best barrels you can. Is there a cheaper way to do it? Yes. But that's not what Peerless wants to do. You're going in at a lower proof because... Is it the cheapest way to do it? No, but it's the way you want to do it. It adds to your character, your quality, and the glass, your packaging, and your bottles. I think they really play to the story as well. So can you talk a little bit about those? Because they're so distinct and unique. I love them.
Yeah. Carson Taylor, Corky's son, he designed our bottle. It took him about 2 years to design this. He put a lot of thought into it. You got to think they were resurrecting their family's brand. They had a chance to really kind of show off something unique. So we found a company outside of Atlanta, Georgia, that actually makes our bottle, and they only do our liquor bottles. So they typically do like cologne and perfume bottles, but they agreed to do our bottle. That's why you don't see any coloring in it. It's virgin glass, so it's first time. We used to use a real cork. Now we did just switch the synthetic. We have our toppers here on top, but he's got Henry Craver's original signature right here across the front too as well. We got that solid piece of glass on the bottom right there. That way, like say, it's already up on its own little pedestal.
Yep.
But if you pay really close attention to it, it's actually based off our doubler. If you ever been to the distiller, you kind of have those middle, you see those rings right around that. It's kind of what our doubler looks like. And it's got nearly like the same top to it as well. But you got to think, he wanted something that stood out in the bar. most bourbon bottles you see, they're tall, slender. They got, a little bit of shape difference to them. Mm-hmm. So he just wanted something different, something that stuck out, but also kind of drew your eye to it, right? Because when you walk into a bar, think how many times you look at the back bar, that bottle is going to stick right out on the back bar.
Absolutely.
For the bourbon. And then on the bottom of it, it has our address, 120 North 10th Street, Louisville, Kentucky, made in the USA. And that's just to show people, once again, that nothing we do is sourced. And I can't express enough, we don't have a problem with that. I love our neighbor, Indiana, some MGP stuff too.
Right.
We just want to make sure, people felt comfortable knowing that anything you got from us, we made right there at the distillery.
Yeah, it is a beautiful bottle, and I know it's trademarked.
Yeah. So, the great thing about that too is you're not going to find that in any stock portfolio, right?
That's right.
They have a packaging award every year too, and it's best label, best cap, and best bottle. And I kid you not, when we released our bottle, first time anyone's ever won all three. We won best label, best cap, and best bottle that year for the packaging too as well.
Well, very cool, very well deserved. And I like you said, that thick glass at the bottom. It looks like it's on its own pedestal. The way it cuts in at the bottom, that it's setting up. And I always thought it was kind of reminded me almost like a bourbon barrel, just because that was almost like a metal band, but with little rivets through it. But I did the doubler, obviously, right? So
yeah. Next time you come down, it's all you're going to be able to see now. And that doubler is our bottle.
Yeah. So now, as a single barrel curator guy, obviously you do single barrels. So can you share a little bit about that program with us and how that works and how people can
see that? It's a lot of fun. And one of the reasons I love it, because I always tell people, people ask what's the best thing? It's the connections you make, the people you meet. So because we only make 10 to 12 barrels a year, very small, maybe like 2,200 barrels a year, we only do 100 barrel picks a year. So 50 bourbon, usually 50 rye, give or take. Sometimes, we'll do a little bit more, but you get to meet people from all over the world, all over the country that, coming in to buy a private barrel because they want the experience of, they love your stuff and they want to taste some of the unique stuff that you have. So the hardest part is, we try to reach new people every year, but you have to take care of the people that take care of you, that push, your everyday products, your small batches. So I'm a yes man when it comes to this. Everybody's like, can I get a barrel? I'm like, yeah. Then I'll talk work, but like, listen, you got to stop promising people barrels all over the place. Like, we got to make sure we keep enough back every year to have older age statements.
Oh man.
And I'm like, no, they're really nice. Like, they're like, we know, but
I'm the curator. It's my job.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm like, yeah, man, but they bought me dinner, and it's just
Matt, we're in line now for because we're going to lunch after this.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, and like I said, it's the people I vacation every year down in Tampa and St. Pete to go hang out with guys I do barrel picks with.
Very cool.
And things like that. So it's a lot of fun, but it can be a little heartbreaking too, because sometimes you gotta tell people no, which I never like doing. But I'm very upfront. Like, I will get you on that waiting list. I will go to bat for you. I'll say, hey, we got to reach some new people this year.
Yeah.
These people I got 20 emails from them. Like, let's get these guys a barrel.
So now you're doing barrel picks of your blend, your bourbon and your rye, and you're doing. Did you say you were doing some barrel picks of the double oak?
Yeah, we've done some barrel picks of the double oaks. We try to It's a great way to kind of test it out in different markets if we're not sure how well it's going to do. Right. So when you get a barrel pick of a double oak, it's a great way to kind of reward some people and actually get a feel for what people think of it too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So. Let's talk about, you kind of alluded to some things coming out already. So you said you're going to have a double oaked rye?
Yeah, I gravitate more towards our rye than I do the bourbon. Both are fantastic, but I am a rye type of drinker. So yeah, we've done the double oak picks. We've done some single barrels of the rye, but now we're going to do a double oak small batch rye. Okay. And I'm so excited. I'm really looking forward to that in November.
Very nice. So what are the things you got?
And then we have a high rye bourbon coming out too. We've been doing, it just turned 4 or 5 years old this year, so we're pulling samples, currently tasting through some samples, and we're gonna get together a batch sometime for the end of the year and get that out as well.
Very nice. Some great things to look forward to. Matt, let's talk about the palate and the finish on this rum finish.
Absolutely delicious.
It is, right?
It's got all those tropical fruits right away. You get like that dried banana, dried mango, dried papaya, dried pineapple right away, and then there's like a fruit, like a bruleed fruit coming near the end, like bruleed bananas, and like vanilla wafer at the end, but it still leaves like some of that heat and those bourbon notes. It lets you know that it's still bourbon near the end. There's a strong oak, the strong vanilla comes through too, I think, at the end.
I agree, man. It's very unique, very nice on the palate, very sweet, like you said, to some of those dried fruits. I mean, to me, I kind of get that, I don't want to say maple syrupy again, but it's almost like that sweetness of a maple syrup to me. But then that spiciness kicks back in, which is really, really cool. I really like that. John, what about you?
To me, I love this one because it does have, like, as you keep saying, like those dried fruit, but it leaves like a brulee, like syrupy sugar over your palate. So like got like a thickness to it, but also like because it dries out my palate a little bit. And some people, necessarily don't like the dryness of palate, but I love how it dries out my palate a little bit because it still obtains the flavor there.
Right.
It's just not as savory as, say, like the small batch double oak.
Yeah, and for me, when I drink something that's kind of like that, I call it like a tannic fit, where it dries. You kind of get that pucker where you want something to drink. I do see what you're saying, but it's not to the extreme to where, even because I'm very sensitive to that. I'm like, I don't like that. But no, I don't really get that. I get the little bit, but it's not off-putting. Like with some bourbons, when I get that, it's like, yeah, no, that's not
it's like a dry, sugary finish.
Yeah. So it's a very nice finish. Even though it does have a little bit of a drying effect, it's not in any way off-putting. So Matt, what are your thoughts on this one?
Oh, absolutely, it's a hit.
Oh yeah,
it is a hit.
Yeah, it is. And you said this one just came out, right?
Yeah. So that one came out in August of this year.
Right.
So it's been out for about a month. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. All right. Well, I mean, we're getting close to the end of the show, actually, the whole thing, the final round, everything. So let's talk about some news. What's going on with you guys? What's going on with you in terms of what the future looks like for you and the brand?
I've always joke around. It's like, you're going to have to drag me out of this position. I got my start here. I love it there. The best people you could work for, and actually I say work with. He hates it when you say work for. Like, he will get on you about that. I'm going to continue just to grow and do things there as much as they'll let me learn. I love distillation, that side of things, but I feel like my strong point is tasting, hosting, grading barrels. So the sky's the limit, I like to say there, and that's the great thing about it. I can do as much as I want and as much as they'll let me do there. They're very supportive.
Yep.
I started a coffee company.
I suppose, I was going to say,
past year there.
Forgot to jump into that, but I was going to say, let's talk about that, because, I mean, I'm fine with time, so you don't have to worry about that. But that's what you're doing yesterday in Frankfurt, right?
Yeah. COVID affected people a lot of different ways, and one thing I was blessed with during COVID is I still got to keep my job. We never shut down. We shut down for tours, but production was still going on. But being a single barrel curator, I have a fascination. One of my hobbies is coffee, and I love the uniqueness of barrels. So during COVID, messing around with some char, some coffee beans, just trying to figure out, like, I think I can do this. Because what got me started was I saw 2 barrel-aged coffee companies, and neither one of them were based out of Kentucky. I was like, like, no one's doing, people were doing barrel-aged coffee, but it wasn't like a big thing here. There was like Maine and South Carolina, like, were the home of these 2 coffee companies. So I decided, I was like, well, I can do this. I taste hundreds barrels a year. I work with cooperages. I come across unique barrels. I was like, I could really create some funky coffee. And I met a good friend of mine that I met during Barrel Picks. He runs the New Orleans Bourbon Festival every year, Corey Welsh.
Yeah, okay.
And he came in one day. He's like, what have you been up to, man? How are things going? I was like so excited. I had like this Tupperware container filled with barrel char and coffee beans. I was like, I'm trying to see if this barrel char will change these coffee beans, because we roasted them before, we're going to roast them after. And I kid you not, he looked right at it, and he's from New Orleans. And he said, I'm in. He's like, you looking for somebody to invest? I was like, well, I'm just going to do like bourbon and rye barrel-aged coffee. He's like, no. He's like,
wow.
He's like, let's pump some. He really did. Like, he jumped right on board. Months later, we had 10 different barrel-aged coffees out, because, we do more than just bourbon and rye. Rum barrel-aged coffee, orange curacao, Amaro, cognac.
Wow.
Anything funky we can get our hands on.
Very
and
nice.
It's been a good time. Yeah, we're just into a little bit over a year now. Bourbon on the Banks was actually the first festival we ever did when we had our coffee. Literally we launched in September last year. Bourbon on the Banks was like at the end, early October.
Nice.
And it was insane.
Yeah,
the turnout we got there.
Yesterday, it was crazy. People were just out there, and like lines of people waiting to get your. And it's like, like Matt said, it was a beautiful day, but it got a little warm. The sun was out. People were standing in line to get hot coffee. I'm like, Damn.
Well, I joked and said, we were doing the Lord's work out there yesterday, and people out there drinking, having a good time, and everyone wants that cup of coffee too. And we were brewing right there on site.
Oh yeah.
We use Quills, which is a local coffee place here in Louisville, make fantastic coffee, so they roast everything for us. But the unique thing about the coffee, I like to say, is what makes it different is while this may be something that we do like as a hobby or on the side. I'm very hands-on with it. I'm the one loading these barrels, unloading these barrels. Corey, my business partner, he lives in New Orleans, so he goes down these coffee ports and sources the best beans before they ever get into even basically right off the ship, right to the containers. We're loading coffee in the car, and I'll come across any unique barrel and work with the flavor profiles with Quills and trying to find stuff that people may say you wouldn't think would go together. Then I want to try it out with some coffee beans and a good barrel.
And it's called Stave and Bean? Yeah,
Stave and Bean. We have an e-commerce website. We're in about 7 different Krogers, a bunch of bars and restaurants around here town too. And the best thing, this is how cool of a guy I work for. So Corky, when this became about, I was like, hey, I really want to intertwine this. Most people drink coffee, drink whiskey. So not only do I get to do the barrel selection with these groups, but what has really become a niche is after we dump their barrel, I'll say, hey, you like coffee? Like, oh, we love coffee. I'm like, I can do your own personal coffee in your barrel pick from us and give you your own logo on the bag and everything. And that has been such a huge hit because, we can do anywhere between 30 to 150 pounds, like whatever you want, however much coffee you want, we can do. Wow. And that has been one of the coolest things to do.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a coffee fan. I mean, it's like coffee in the morning and then afternoon, it's whiskey time, right? So like you take one for the other and it works out great.
Yeah. And what better than be able to promote Peerless in a little bit of a different line of work, coffee. So, if you're a coffee lover and not really a whiskey or drinker, you're going to pick it up like, well, what's Peerless Bourbon?
Right.
It's just, as you can tell from the festival, everything goes together. And the community is so great. When we launched the coffee company, it was really nice to see, because I run all our shipping. So it was so cool to see the names and orders that come through and are still coming through to, it's so supportive.
Very cool. That's awesome, man. Well, congratulations on that. So, and I meant to talk about that earlier. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put it at the very end. We're having such a good conversation. It was like, oh yeah, we got to talk about that, man.
No, I appreciate it. No worries. Like I said, Peerless, this is my love, my first true focus, but anytime I can intertwine the two, I never thought the coffee would be as big. I was just like, I just want to start something on the side. And next thing you know, here we are. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much bigger than what I thought it was going to be. So, but it's been a lot of fun.
Well, congratulations on that. That's very cool. Matt, before we wrap it up, man, you got any final thoughts you want to add?
I'm just super appreciative, John, that you were able to take the time and we were able to steal you away. I know this is weekend time is super valuable, especially you were at the festival all day yesterday, and here you're telling us you've got this second business that's going absolutely gangbusters. So thanks for squeezing us in and chilling with us.
No, and it kind of goes back to what we first talked about when we first started the podcast. When he asked me if you always feel like you're working, I'm like, not really, because this stuff isn't work. This is kind of like the rewards of the industry, right? I love hanging out with people, meeting new people. I love podcasts too. I'll say yes to any podcast.
Awesome.
I love doing them. And like I said, branching out, meeting people, because you never know what new opportunities come up or who you're going to meet.
Right.
And it's just one of the people always ask me, the best thing about this industry is the people you meet. Cool. And just the support system and how everyone thinks that just because you work for Michter's and I work for Peerless or something that we're not friends. I'm like, no, we always get along. It's the marketing people that don't like each other.
That's great. Because that was funny, because that was going to be the final question, the best part of your journey so far, obviously, what you just said.
The people you meet, I tell you, out of everything, that's one of the biggest rewards in this.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, John, we appreciate you spending time with us on a Sunday here in the Barrel Room at Repeal Steakhouse. It's been a lot of fun, man.
I appreciate you. Like I said, I'm playing my master distiller in fantasy football, and he is whooping me right now. So this has been a great distraction than getting angry watching my phone.
Oh, man. Yeah, have a few drinks and let Caleb kick your ass in fantasy football.
He's already so good in everything else in life. I just wanted this one little victory this Sunday, and I don't think it's going to happen.
Oh, man, I'm so sorry about that. Well, we appreciate you joining us, man. It's been a lot of fun, and thanks for sharing all the wonderful pours. Very impressed with what you guys are doing and the way you're doing it. I mean, very genuine, very sincere about it, and very committed to the quality and excellence. And we appreciate that as we're podcasters, but we're obviously fans of bourbon before anything else, man. So we appreciate it when brands are doing things the way that they want to do it and doing it right. regardless of the expense and the cost. I mean, so that's really impressive. So we appreciate that. And, we appreciate our listeners as well. So we want to thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate all you do for us. Even when you email me and tell me that I say sure too much, it's okay. I'm all for that. And I did say sure. And you saw me, I caught myself after I say it, I'd be like, no, I'm not supposed to say sure. But please, feel free to email us your comments, and constructive criticisms are welcome. We appreciate that. We want to hear your ideas for shows. We got some great guests lined up, like John, coming up over the next couple of months. So we're really excited about that. Looking forward to sharing all those guests with you and their stories as well. And you can follow us on Instagram as well. You can follow us on Facebook, join our private Facebook group, the Bourbon Lifers. We'd love to have you in there. And we just appreciate all that you do for us. And we appreciate our sponsors. Again, this is the Bourbon Life Podcast. We're presented by Repeal Steakhouse today, and we appreciate their support for this show. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the Bourbon Life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the Bourbon Life.